Welcome everyone to an interesting conversation on Leading Work 2.0 Leadership in the Future of Work panel. And today we have with us some amazing leaders who are helping create organizations of future, and we will learn from them what it takes and how has been their journey been, and what are some of their learnings and some of their findings. So we have on our panel Andrea Patten. She is a Chief People Officer at MOBÄ. Kristine, Janhunen, who's the Chief People Officer at Generate Capital, and Kurt Landon, who is a founder and CEO of Inspira. Thank you, everyone. And as a start, I would love to have you guys introduce yourself, introduce your journey, what brought you to the fascinating world of HR, and how you are seeing the industry shaping up. And maybe Kurt, you can start first.
Sure, my pleasure. Great to be with everyone today. This is Kurt Landon with Inspira. Just briefly about my background. So I've been working in the HR and human capital space for the last 26 years. Most of that time in life sciences, consulting, and tech. Moved around a lot geographically to all the different regions in the world, and lived in all corners of the U.S. Started my career at Accenture, actually as a software engineer, and then migrated into human capital consulting there, and then into corporate HR, and spent most of the rest of my career in corporate HR, next in life sciences with Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, later at Biogen biotech company in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I also spent quite a bit of time in tech, so I was a HR executive at Expedia and the chief people officer at Pinterest, and then started my own firm, Inspira, which is a boutique HR consulting firm, and began that journey about 3 years ago. And I won't go on and on about Inspira, but just to say we work with about 80 different organizations in the for-profit and not-for-profit space, all different industries, different stages of evolution, doing a lot of different human capital work, from manager and leadership development to DEI, org effectiveness, and HR technology implementation, and now executive search and recruiting work as well. So great to be with all of you.
Thanks, Kurt. Andrea, you want to go next?
Sure. Nice to meet you, Kurt. Thanks for that. I'm Andrea Patten. I am the Chief People Officer at MOBÄ. Thank you, Vishal, for having me today. I have 25 years of HR experience myself. Currently, I'm the CPO at MOBÄ, which is a healthcare company where we help people with unique and persistent health challenges achieve better outcomes, which is a very mission-driven organization, which is something that has become super important to me in my career. In my career, a bit of a curvy path. I started in an organization, a startup, and startups being what they are, a lot of opportunity, which I grabbed. Ultimately became the HR department for a sizable company, and therefore learned kind of on the job. Went back to school to get my bachelor's and master's degree in HR, because that was, I knew it was important to have the foundations, although I thought that the job itself was pretty intuitive in many ways. I love the fact that my job continues to be today to support not only the business, but the employees who make the business. And in my curvy path, I've also been a middle school teacher. In the midst of my career, I had 2 kids in school. Being present in their school was really important, and based on that, I was asked to be a middle school teacher to teach career and business skills, which I then really understood that having the mindset of becoming who you want to become in this world really starts at a young age. So I was really happy to have that experience. Today, my experience is in healthcare, but I've been in many industries. I too worked at Accenture in HR. Also worked in startup mostly in my career. And my passion really is people and being able to create systems that help us care for our people in our communities within organizations. So that's a little bit about me.
That is fascinating, Andrea. I love the idea of teaching kids entrepreneurship and business and all that. I think this is fascinating, and thank you for all you're doing in that side. So yeah,
No, I was just going to say thank you for that.
awesome. Kristine,
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Kurt and Andrea, it's so nice to meet you virtually. And Vishal, thanks for so much for bringing us together. I'm really looking forward to talking to other smart people in this industry and learning a lot today. I'm, like Vishal said, I'm Kristine Janhunen. I'm the Chief People Officer at Generate Capital. I started out my career being trained as a clinical psychologist, and I realized very early in my externship that behavior change is actually super hard. And because I'm an inherent problem solver and builder, I then migrated to trying to learn how to build businesses using that lever of human capital. I went to business school, then I spent time at British Petroleum in the wind and solar division, learning about big corporate business building. Then I went into private equity, and there I really learned how to form teams quickly and how to surgically address human capital issues. I'm now in my dream job where I get to combine my passion for using a deeper understanding of people as what's often an underutilized lever in business building and in driving business performance. And I get to mix that with my deep desire to leave the planet better than I found it. Here at Generate Capital, we focus on investments and we operate assets all in the sustainable infrastructure space. And if you think about, how do those two vectors come together for me? Well, really, sustainability is fundamentally about people, building a planet that can support generations of humanity for all time. And at Generate here, my mandate is to assemble a team that comes from all walks of life with diverse backgrounds, skills, and lifestyles. And I'm the lucky one that gets to work on building a culture and the people systems that support each one of our employees in their pursuit of, financial and emotional and professional and physical security. So I feel like I'm the luckiest person on the planet, and I'm so grateful to be here today.
I think that's awesome. Thanks, Kristine. So I think one thing that I really liked about when we spoke, Kristine, last was so you said something which is beautiful, that it's a leader's job to bring make sure that every employee bring their best self to work, and it's focusing on it. I think that's fascinating, and thank you for being such a people-centric leader in that perspective. So let's start with the first question that I have for everyone in this room. So basically, we have been through a lot as a society. We have been through a lot over the last 1.5 years, and you have been either involved with leading a people organization, leading the people in an organization, or helping other organization manage their people well. So with such a central focus in leading people to the future, I'm curious to learn what are some of your stock observation that you garnered over the last 1 year going through this massive this pandemic wave, and Andrea, maybe you can start first.
Okay, great. Thank you. It really has been an incredible year, and I would say outside of HR, outside of HR, I think all of us, as part of being in the employed world, has had to endure some things we've never had to even think about enduring. So you're going to hear something very persistent in my comments, and that really is about leadership and making sure that we, like you said, Kristine, looking at people as individuals. The stark revelation for me really was something I knew, but it really became clear that we are all individuals. I think COVID brought out, shined a light on the fact that there were people in their own situations with their own circumstances who had to figure out how to manage. And we as leaders and being in charge of the culture, and when I say in charge, being lucky enough to say that that's a big part of my job to help shape, I think it was really important that we had good leaders in the way that everybody needed individual attention. Everybody had different needs, different types of situations going on, and without empathetic and effective leadership, I don't know that we would have fared really well. And this is really selfish on our behalf as well. I mean, good leadership means, you have continue to have engaged, motivated people. Here at MOBÄ, where we actually help our clients with their health and happiness, it's extremely important that we do the same here internally. So, again, I would just say good leadership was a light was shown on it, saying, we really need this to be able to manage our workforces well and to be able to respond in a dynamic way when things happen that are out of our control, particularly when they're universal. And these good leaders need to have discretion. And that was something that was really important to us here at MOBÄ. So good leadership is extremely important, empathetic, effective, and there also needs to be, the manager needs to have the discretion to be able to help their employees in a way that's helpful to them.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much. Kristine, you want to go next?
Sure. I love that point about leadership. Andrea, you're so right. I think one of the first things we did, as there were so many unknowns, was just get together as a leadership team and really talk about what we wanted to say, how much we wanted to communicate, because we knew as we all spread apart, to our homes, that staying connected was going to be really important, and that requires real leadership. For me, I think the thing that really stands out as I look back is that what we learned here at Generate is we're really just better together. Collaboration, decision making, problem solving, innovating, all these things happen more effectively when you're in a room together. Our brains aren't really wired to exist solely in a 2D world, and so we're so looking forward to incorporating that third dimension back into our daily work lives and seeing what kind of productivity lift we can get from it. We survived as an organization. We actually did more than survive. We had a really great year in spite of everything, but I'm looking forward to that, sort of that step change where we can sort of bump back into thriving.
Can I ask a question, Kristine? How are
Sure.
that feels, I love the way you described that. We've had a similar experience, but remotely, I think we found a way to be extremely effective. And that is one of the things we hear from our employees today, and I imagine you might as well. What is your thought on that? As you say, you're excited to get people back into the office. What is your thought about, do you think there'll be opposition? Do you anticipate a response that's positive? Very curious.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear what you guys are doing too. I think we're all trying to figure this out in real time and, really understand how, A, is this a trend? B, is being remote or, being a hybrid or going fully back to office, like any one of those choices, what kind of long-term effects are those going to have on our business productivity and our business performance? We did figure it out, like everybody. It didn't take long before we all found a rhythm and learned how to get a little more comfortable not seeing each other. But for us, we have always been a little distributed. We've had, we own and operate physical renewable energy assets. So we have people at asset sites. So we haven't all been in an office together, ever, but we still are super committed to trying to come back into offices together as much as we possibly can. We spend an exorbitant amount of, time, energy, and resources making sure that we bring everybody together at different points during the year, just so we have that connection, and we'll continue to do that.
Do you get any resistance to that from your employees?
I think everyone's still, so the short answer is perhaps a little yes, just because people are still in limbo. People are still figuring out, what is this going to feel like and look like for me? There's still a lot of anxiety out there. There's still a lot of unknowns, at least, with our workforce. And so, yeah, there are definitely people at our organization that have questions and sort of want to try it on and want to do it slowly. We're not going to go from being fully remote to jumping back in and everyone being in the office over 5 days a week. We're going to do some kind of slow, soft, reopening and phase back into it. And I think we're just going to take it sort of, month by month and see how it goes. We have a plan, and we hope by January 1st we're back into a rhythm, so everybody understands what our expectations are. But yeah, of course, I'm sure you guys do too. We have people all over the health concern spectrum. We have, at Generate, we have people all over the sort of emotional concern spectrum. And so we're trying to figure out how best to address all those needs while still, being really focused on performance and making sure we're hitting our numbers.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristine. So, Kurt, you want to share your perspective over the last year?
Sure. And I really appreciate the comments that Kristine and Andrea made, and they resonate a lot. I think for me, one of the things that's been interesting is moving from being in an in-house role where I had my primary focus within the organization that I was a part of, and then I was, working within my network of human resources and line leader colleagues to try and understand how some of these issues would be handled. And then now, sitting in the position I am in my firm and seeing what's happening across, 80 or so different organizations has been illuminating for me as well, and I think also positions us as a firm well to advise organizations on how to navigate during these unprecedented times. And while it sounds maybe a little bit simplistic to say this, I think always trying to stay several steps ahead of what's coming next has been some of the advice that mindset-wise we give a lot of our clients, and very much on this topic. And an example of that that I see is part of what I think Kristine and Andrea just touched on. So in Kristine's organization, if I understand what you shared, Kristine, accurately, you've always had sort of this hybrid model where we've had some people in sort of headquarters or central locations and some people deployed out at sites. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And certainly there are other organizations where they've always had a virtual model. I mean, for my own firm, we have about 50-something employees in my firm, and they've always been virtual. And then you have organizations where they've always been 100% on site. And I think each of those context is very different, but I think this now presents some unique challenges, and so there are a couple that come to mind. So one is I really believe that the dynamics of the talent market are shifting very significantly and in a direction that's different than many people predicted. So I still observe and hear people talking about the talent market in the way that it was discussed prior to the pandemic or in the early stages of the pandemic. And what I mean by that is I heard a lot at that time, let's say 2 years ago or 18 months ago, where people were anticipating this huge negative economic impact, and therefore made the assumption that would mean a lot of joblessness and a lot of additional sort of emphasis on it being an employer's market versus an employees or job seekers market. And I think what we're seeing is exactly the opposite. And there are a variety of reasons, which we probably don't have time to get into, as to why that's happening. But just a few data points that might be interesting. So, within the next 5 or 6 years, we're anticipating seeing about a 6 million worker deficit with almost 100 million jobs going unfilled. And, we had a lot of baby boomers who retired. We have more people who are taking early retirement because of the pandemic, voluntarily or involuntarily. And then, there's this concept called the Great Resignation, which essentially is this record low LFPR, the labor force participation rate. And so there's this opting out of the workforce that's been exacerbated by the pandemic. And so when you couple all of that with the fact that I recently learned that the birth rate, for example, in the U.S. is the lowest in U.S. history at 6.6%. All those factors together really indicate a tremendous skilled labor shortage that we're experiencing now, and it will just get worse in the future. So a lot of the advice that we've been giving our clients is you need to really pivot away from this idea that, for example, the role of a hiring manager is to assess every candidate and really have every candidate prove their worthiness and competence and eligibility for the job, to pivot to more of a mindset and model where it is completely a job seeker's market. And we predict that within a couple of quarters from now, you will really, really see this very pervasively. And so candidates will be interviewing employers. Candidates will be interviewing hiring managers to see, is this someone I want to work for? And so the prior comments that were made about leadership and management, I couldn't agree with more. And so therefore, we've chosen to focus a big part of our practice on frontline people manager effectiveness and capability, frontline people manager coaching and development and action learning, because we all know that that role of the frontline manager is, in some cases, even more important than senior executive management and leadership. And so these frontline managers and hiring managers need to learn how to sell the employer value proposition of why come work for this organization. They need to be able to gently and softly assess candidates, but probably tilt the balance of selling versus assessment differently. And the last thing I'll just say for time's sake for right now, and this is, I think this also brings up a host of very interesting diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging related concerns. So if you have a workforce that is what I would call uneven, and not because that's part of the intended strategy like Kristine shared, where you have people, located at a headquarters and then dispersed, that's intentional. But in other cases now, it's not intentional because people have chosen to work remotely. The company will allow them to do that. So you have some people in the office, some people who are not in the office. What's the implication of that in terms of inclusive management and inclusive leadership? So do you have people in the office who are going to, go do something social after hours or go have lunch or something like that? And then there are people who are left behind because they are in some remote location. And we hypothesize there could be some interesting patterns related to that based on DEI demographics. So you could see that sort of lack of inclusion becoming even wider as this progresses. And so that will put more pressure on frontline managers to lead much more inclusively in this sort of uneven, as I call it, disbursement of talent and where they're based. So a lot in there. There's a lot of complex issues, and that's what we're trying to really help a lot of our clients navigate.
Kurt, sorry, this is Kristine. I love that you're focusing on frontline managers. I think that's just so prescient and super timely. Are you finding that your clients that you're working with on this, had they already identified that as a need, or is this something you sort of gathered as you spoke with a number of your clients and it continued to bubble up?
Thanks, Kristine. I'll admit that throughout my HR career, this concept of the importance of frontline people manager capability and effectiveness, this has always been something that I've believed is the most important thing. And my belief has been that if you have great people managers, everything else in the people ecosystem works fairly well. They're going to hire better people. They'll onboard and align them well. They'll manage their performance well. They'll drive greater throughput and results. They'll retain them and have higher levels of engagement. And if people leave, they will probably be effective at maintaining relationships from an alumni perspective, et cetera. But literally every organization I've been in and every organization we work with, when asked, self-identifies that self-discloses that they have a substandard level of people manager capability and effectiveness. And what I've observed is over all these years, people are what I call admiring the problem. And so they're acknowledging that it's a problem. They're acknowledging it's an important problem with consequences. But I haven't really seen a lot done to address that in a new and innovative way. And so maybe there's a new and interesting training course, and then that raises awareness levels, but it doesn't necessarily really fundamentally change behavior and outcomes. So when I started my firm, we decided we're going to really crack the code on this, and we're going to figure out a way to really drive change. And so I had this idea of taking a page from senior leadership executive coaching and bringing that down into the trenches for frontline managers at about 1/5 the cost, right? Because it's not going to be scalable and affordable if you do that at the pricing of executive coaching. So kind of almost like hand-to-hand combat with frontline managers. So what are you dealing with today? How can we support you in helping you figure out how to deal with this particular employee issue, or close this really difficult to close candidate, or this is the first time that you are managing someone who's going through, let's say, a gender transition, and how can you navigate that? All these types of issues, and most organizations don't have the bandwidth to support all of these frontline managers, so it's just this missed opportunity. So we're doing this coaching with frontline managers. We're doing sort of action learning and really innovative small cohort development with frontline managers. And in every organization we're doing it, we're getting tremendously positive feedback where people are saying this is the first thing they've seen that actually moves the dial. And then they're expanding it through their whole organization. So it's sort of catching on like wildfire. And then now we're just layering on top of that some of these other issues like managing people remotely, some of the DEI issues, et cetera.
We've had a little different approach to that. I love what you're saying there, Kurt, about those frontline managers and being, a startup. I think we had to kind of do a little bit more of a grassroots to kind of understand how we could help our folks. You said a few very interesting things. Your comment about selling versus assessing. In our recruiting practices, I think the one thing that really stands out for us is we need to make sure that they are a good fit for the organization. So that's a little concerning to me, thinking that we just have to sell folks. And I understand your point for sure. For us, for our frontline managers, we really had to focus on that again because of the pandemic. We knew that we needed to communicate and contact one-to-one. So our approach was we developed these competencies and learning development paths for our frontline managers that we work with them to be able to, first of all, be empathetic and understand kind of what the ultimate outcome is that they're desiring from that employee. And also, looking at it from a perspective of, we are all individuals. As a manager, you are looked at as an example, you're looked at as a model, and I think that's really helpful to keep people accountable and also to rise to the occasion. So for us, it was really important to empower our frontline workers, which obviously we're much smaller than all of the clients or the accumulation of clients that you're talking about, but it was really helpful for us to be able to set competencies in front of them and say, this is what we actually expect from you, empathetic, understanding your folks. And there's a whole bunch of that fall under the category team building, accountability. There's quite a few, but it really leads a learning path for them. So that's been effective.
Awesome. Thanks, Kurt. And thank you, Andrea, for your point. So now, if we talk about your personal roles themselves, how that has evolved over the last 1 year, I'd love to know your point of view on how has your role as an HR leader or as a leader in general changed over the past 1 year. And Kristine, maybe you can go first.
Sure, I'd love to. I mean, my role continues to change just because we're growing so much as an organization. But I would say just personally, I've learned a lot about the physical and emotional needs of a diverse and geographically distributed workforce over the last year. I think, before 2020, often a people leader's job was focused primarily on financial and, sort of professional goals and security. did a lot of work in, compensation and benefits and development and performance management. But considerations for mental and physical health used to be something, maybe you outsourced or maybe you put at the bottom of your priority list. And that's no longer true, at least not for me and not for us. We are thinking a lot about, just like Andrea, you were asking, we think a lot about how can we provide the best environment that continues to sort of underpin our culture, but also helps people be their best selves at work.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristine. Andrea, you want to go next?
I will echo quite a bit of what Kristine said. I mean, this year has been a year of learning. Again, with all the experience that I have in my back pocket, I don't know that we could have been prepared for what this would do to our workforce. I would say my role has changed to the extent that we go a lot deeper when we're thinking about what we need to do for our employees and how we can support them. We look more to, being empathetic with them. Again, we have extremely talented people, as I'm sure all of you do, and their health, their mental health is super important. So we focused on that quite a bit this year.
Thanks, Andrea. So, Kurt, you play a very interesting role. So you lead your organization, and then you assist clients in a similar role, leading their organizations. So, what has been your observation?
Well, I think for me, it's been an interesting thing because part of what I'm experiencing is kind of going back to a much earlier time in my career when, after as I mentioned, I started my career as a software engineer for a brief period of time and then got into the human capital practice at Accenture. And so I worked specifically within change management, communications, strategic change comms, etc. And that's one of the areas that we're seeing a huge resurgence in now, based on not just the pandemic, but also the racism and anti-racism related topics that are going on, especially in this country right now, and a lot of the economic impact of some of the different things going on in the world right now. So I think because of all these things and the implications they have on organizations, I am actually seeing this sort of rebirth and renewed interest from line leaders in this change management and communication space. So on a personal note, that's really gratifying because it's an area of passion for me, since that's where I started my career. But I've always believed that this is such an important area, but it felt like it went a bit dormant for about 20 years, or at least played a little bit less of a prominent role. And then now we are seeing an incredible amount of demand for work in this space, to the point where we established a specific part of our practice to focus on this, and are doing quite a bit of work on that. So I would say that's one. The other would probably be anything and everything related to DEI, as I and others have mentioned so far. And I think this is just an area where I think for all of us as human resources and human capital leaders and line leaders, we all need to continually stay current and up our game and build our proficiency on this topic, our competence on this topic, because the ground is moving so quickly under our feet on this, sort of overnight, because of the police brutality and other racism-related events that have occurred and are occurring. There was this shift almost overnight from talking about things in organizations like unconscious bias and inclusive leadership and allyship, all important things, but literally from one day to the next, to talking about building anti-racist organizations and auditing people processes through the lens of racism. And I remember very vividly about 9 months ago, when I kind of woke up one morning and came to work and was confronted with this very much, and didn't necessarily feel like that was something that a lot of people were seeing coming, myself included. And so that was a an important sort of lesson and reminder that this space, I think more than anything else in the people space, is moving so quickly. So part of what we're trying to do is think about, okay, what's next? What's the next thing in the DEIB space that is that we all need to be prepared for? And so we're putting together, for example, boot camps for HR leaders and line leaders to build their competence in this DEIB space. And we're thinking 10 years out. So as crazy as it sounds, are we going to be in an environment 10 years from now where being an inclusive manager, inclusive leader means that you have teams comprised of, as crazy as it sounds, robots, if you will, who are part of the workforce, or other AI-related kind of technology components to your workforce? And what does it mean to be inclusive of that, in addition to the other members of the team that we think about? Just to be provocative, that's an example. So I think for me, the biggest thing is trying to do the daily work and execute and solve the problems that we know about, but try and think 3 steps, 5 steps, 10 steps ahead about what are we going to be expected to be proficient at a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. And that's been a pivot for me this past year.
Awesome. I think, Kurt, amazing points. And you raise a very interesting point. I think over the last couple of years had been pretty interesting when it comes to employee engagement and employee equity and employee representation, activism. And there's a lot of unrest, political unrest going on. There's a lot of other unrests going on. And over every HR leader that we spoke to over the last couple of months, there had been a consistent outcry on, okay, what's next when it comes to creating a more DEI, more equitable organization. And I'd love to know, Andrea and Kristine, your point of view of how you are addressing this. And maybe Andrea, you can go first.
Yes, thank you. For us, again, being a startup or smaller organization, we knew, immediately that as the world did, the rude awakening, the fact that being a good person is just not enough when it comes to systemic racism. So here, with the way we handled it, we knew we needed quick action. I myself do not have a background in DE&I. We brought on a consultant to help us because we knew what we were dealing with was extremely sensitive, and we wanted to do it well. And I didn't say right on purpose because I don't know that right exists. I think it's a little different for everybody, but we really wanted to make sure that we were doing this comprehensively. We created a grassroots effort. We had 40 volunteers in our organization who became part of what we called the response plan. It was a strategic action plan that we put together with the help of the consultants, and these 40 individuals became separated into 5 groups and really focused on what do we need to do now, what are some of the things that that are important to you as individuals and important to the organization. And we looked at some of the minorities and some of the other groups to find out, what are some of the things that we're missing. So with the help of those 40 individuals, I think we did a really nice job of, first of all, making sure that it was part of our culture and that it breathed within our MOBÄ walls. The other thing I think it did was it gave everybody a voice. And I'll say that that wasn't it was a difficult exercise, I'll say that. And I say that because it was something we desperately knew was important. And I say we, I'll speak for myself as the CPO and my team. We knew it was important, but we also knew making a mistake was probably, first of all, the sensitivity, making a mistake would not be a good thing. And also making sure that people felt like we were serious about it. So our grassroots effort really turned out to be a wonderful experiment, if you will. In the process, we have a DE&I director who is awesome, and it's been part of our company. The other wonderful thing I would say about COVID is I think we learned a lot about each other because we had to be really specific about asking things and making sure that we were connecting. She, our director of DE&I, was one of those people. She was a jewel within our midst that we had not known. Had health equity had been a passion of hers. She had worked in the community, also as a pharmacist, and she just had the ability and the comprehensive understanding of what we needed to do on a grassroots level. So my point is we are learning. Kurt, you are so right. When we think about what we need to do in the future, that's where we go, and what we've learned for ourselves is we got to take it one step at a time. We know that we need grace to make progress, so that's what we ask for. We have to push the ball forward, and without grace, there is no change. So that is how we have adjusted here.
Awesome. Kristine, you want to add to it?
Sure, I'll jump in here. A lot of, Andrea, what you said resonated for me. We also had a very organic response to the, just the increased social unrest last summer. I'll say for us, because we're focused on sustainability and our mission is, all about, proving that sustainability can win. One of the big outcomes of our work in sustainability that it's always been a part of our values is that just and equitable access for historically underserved communities becomes, a focus and a priority, because often the communities of color or underserved communities are disproportionately affected by, the problems from that of burning fossil fuels or brown energy, and there's often sort of energy insecurity. And so one of the very intended outcomes of our work has always been to provide that equitable access to clean energy across, no matter who the community is or what the community is. But we also had a very grassroots organic response to the groundswell of interest and focus across the country last year. And it was really incredible to see that a number of people in our organization stepped up and took leadership roles, again, sort of like Andrea experienced, in ways that we hadn't planned or hadn't anticipated or couldn't have predicted. But it has been a really wonderful way for us to get together. We have what we call a JEDI council, so justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And, we work together to prioritize what it is we want to change inside our organization and how it is and how we want to continue to have a greater impact in the communities in which we operate. And so, we're still in that work. And it really resonated for me, Andrea, what you said about making mistakes. I think, this is really uncharted territory, sort of from a corporate perspective in a way. And although definitely not for many, many individuals across all of these corporations. But when we were first discussing this with our board last summer, one of our board members told us and gave us the advice, my advice to you is to be brave, not perfect. And so that has been our motto through all of this. We're just trying to be brave. We're trying to do what we believe, is right and drive greater impact. And we're trying not to be worried about being perfect, and that's hard. But we're, every day we're working to get better.
I love that. I love that saying.
Yeah, and even JEDI is a pretty innovative crack at it. I think that's pretty innovative and fascinating. So Kurt, you want to add to this?
Just to say that I really love that as well, Kristine, and I love the term JEDI, that acronym, and then also this brave but not perfect. And I think it is interesting because, again, on this entire DEI topic, everyone, including individuals from historically oppressed and marginalized populations, are ill-equipped to navigate during these times. And so I think one of the big ahas that I've had is that, this is not just about people who don't self-identify as being part of, let's say, BIPOC communities, learning and trying to become more astute on this DEI topic. It's also individuals who are part of those communities, and there are issues within divisiveness within these communities. We all know that exists anyway. And so everyone is trying to understand how to behave, how to show up, how to lead, how to act, how to interact. And so I think I love the fact that you use the word grace, and I use that all the time these days, because I think we all need to provide grace to one another as we're learning. And I think as long as people are learning and they're moving forward and they're evolving and they have good intentions, that imperfection point really resonates with me and is coupled with grace. So I love all those things that you just shared.
Awesome. So one interesting thing that came. So you all are leading people organization. You are managing people organizations. So now technology played an important role over the last 1 year. But I think you also have a pretty stark responsibility to maintain the culture and basically narrate with whatever is happening. And so I'm curious to learn from all of you is what's the role of technology has played over the last 1 year and where it fails, where it actually exceeded. So maybe Kurt, you want to go first?
Sure. So we have an HR technology division of our firm, and we decided to build HR technology products to meet unmet needs. So we're not really playing in the space of ATS and HCM and some of these spaces, but more trying to create some HR technology solutions for areas where there are no solutions. But we do have a fairly strong point of view about existing HR technology solutions that are out there in some of those more saturated spaces. So maybe 2 points that I'll highlight. One is that, I think that looking at things through the lens of people, process, and technology, and as Andrea knows from our time at Accenture, that sort of was instilled in me from the early days of my career. And so I think about the fact that as we're talking about all the issues that we've discussed today, in terms of remote work and DEI and manager and leader effectiveness, trying to think about that not just from that people component, but also from a technology component. And are there ways that technology can be useful or helpful? I think we're all aware that there's been this advent of technology platforms to create sort of internal talent brokerage marketplace types of things like Gloat and other platforms like that. And I think that fits well with the point that we were talking about earlier about it being an employee and job seekers market. And so the more things that I think organizations can implement and offer like that to convey to candidates and to their own employees that this is an environment that really puts a premium on you being able to have a say in the way that your employment experience evolves is really going to be important. The second point that I would just make is that the way I think a lot about HR technology is that I see organization after organization really try and implement HR technology solutions in one fell swoop in an overall comprehensive way. And I have nothing against, a lot of the big technology players. I think they are excellent and very, very good in their own right, but they're not always the best from a user experience perspective or best in class in particular niche areas. So if you go, for example, with one big technology solution from an HCM perspective and then make the decision to use that for all of your HR technology needs, such as, let's say, career development planning or performance management, sometimes those larger technology platforms aren't the best in some of those niche areas. So we find ourselves recommending, great, go with that large scale HCM if that's something that you want to do, but then make the decision to put in place some of these really contemporary, novel, niche, boutique, smaller technology platforms that are best in class in some of those particular areas, and then make sure that things are well integrated. In order to do any of that, making sure that your data is accurate and well cleaned up to prepare for any of these implementations is key. And we see time and time again, a lot of issues where the data is just a mess. And again, there's this admiring of the problem for years, and then there's the decision to do something about that data cleanup at exactly the same time that a big HR technology implementation is being executed. And that makes it much more expensive, much more painful, much more stressful, and is not optimal. So my strong advice is everyone should get their houses in order from a data accuracy and integrity perspective, assuming that there will be multiple technology implementations that will follow in the months and years to come.
Well, awesome, good. So, Kristine, anything to add to this?
No, I'm good. I agree with a lot of what Kurt said, and I think it's super interesting to think about, where this is going to take us, this intersection of technology, data analytics, and people operations, which have historically sort of been separated.
Interesting. Andrea?
I agree with what Kurt was talking about as far as finding out what you, and to paraphrase, understanding what our needs are and then trying to meet those needs and not necessarily trying to give us one cover-all of one specific answer. We utilize several different HR systems or modules that help us kind of create, first of all, add to our culture and also create efficiencies. So to be honest, we don't really think about it much more than that. I think for social platforms, we at this point are using, we don't have a social platform. I think there's a lot of value in that. And I know that really is part of HR technology today. So it's something I'm interested in learning more about. And Kurt, maybe there'd be an opportunity for a conversation about that.
That would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. So, Kristine, so you talked about something fascinating. So you said you're eyeing at Jan 1st when you're expecting folks to come back. So I'm curious, and I'm curious to hear a point of view from all the leaders on the panel. So how do you plan that? What are you most passionate and excited about when it comes to bringing the workforce back?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So we're starting now. Jan 1 is sort of when we're thinking we'll be sort of fully operational and really understand how it's going to all settle. But we're definitely, starting now, and we're requiring everybody to be fully vaccinated to be in the office just to, optimize people's comfort and security around their health. So, the way I've been thinking about it, the way we've been talking about it here at Generate, is we're really thinking about how do we recreate that bridge between our work culture and a community. Vishal, you and I talked about this before, but something that's really been on my mind is thinking about how historically we're more isolated from each other than we've ever been. We don't live near our tribes. We're transient. We're mobile. We optimize for weather, cost of living, opportunity, all of these things in ways that we sort of never did generations ago. And over the last year, with most of us, either isolated alone or in very small family groups, we were lonelier than ever. And so I think there's a really incredible opportunity in front of us as business leaders to create sort of a work as community space and place and ethos, and provide a place where people can thrive and be their best selves. The paradigm is shifting. We no longer are, as a group of people leaders, we no longer are thinking of people as just cogs in our business, but rather they are our business. And even if you make a product, or you're a manufacturer, or and you don't trade sort of on knowledge or judgment or human capital assets like we do, you still, I think what we've really begun to learn is that people are the heart of every business, and we can no longer afford to overlook that. In fact, it has to be the focus. And so we're really thinking about making sure Generate feels like a community for people so that they can continue to, find greater levels of connectedness at work.
Awesome. Andrea, you want to add something quick on it?
Just the focus. We have the same focus that you're talking about, Kristine. It's definitely regarding our people and making sure that, we do. And the reason I asked before if it was something that you were seeing opposition to, because we're being extremely vigilant in understanding what some of those oppositions are, because they're real today, where before a policy would be what we set. So we're navigating and we're learning, and we have not come up with our solution yet. So, as we all are, we're working.
Awesome. Kurt, you want to add something to it?
I think I'll pass on this one. I think the comments that were just made were perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. So now we're at the tail end of the conversation. So basically, if you want to say give one advice to listeners and viewers who are seeing this, bracing this transformation, seeing this excitement of coming back to the office, what would you suggest? What would you advise to other leaders who are facing the same challenges as you do? And maybe Kristine, you can go first.
Okay, I'd love to. I can't wait to hear Kurt and Andrea's. I know we're sort of wrapping down here, and I really, really enjoyed being able to listen to, what Kurt and Andrea are thinking about too. I would love to continue that conversation over time. But anyway, advice. Let's see. I think I would say, for us, what's been really important to me has been to think about, don't underestimate the power in asking people in our companies to be more of who they are, versus I think what we've done historically is we've often asked people to develop capabilities, skills, or interests that don't come naturally to them. But the way we think about sort of talent at Generate, and to very positive effect, is that people should double down on what they're great at. You should hire them for what they're great at, not hire them for things that they can't yet do, or they haven't professed an interest in doing. And then for us, getting it right, we take our time, we get each hire exactly right, and then we offer as much development and growth support as we can around that. And I think, in this pressure to grow and scale and move fast, often hiring is something that is, there's a lot of shortcuts, and we've just chosen not to take any of those shortcuts. And we just take our time getting to know candidates, and they in turn take their time getting to know us. And so then when we jump in together, into this work relationship, we're all in, and they are too, and that goes a long ways.
Wonderfully put, Kristine. So, Andrea, you want to go next? Andrea, I think you're in mute.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Can you just repeat the question, Vishal? I just want to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
Yes. So basically, what is one advice that you could give to other leaders who are listening and watching this?
Okay. Thank you. I didn't know if it was regarding return to work. I will tell you that my advice is the same to people I talk with in my own family. Be kind. Be kind and understand that there's a lot going on in this world, and it means something different to many different people in our work relationships and our personal relationships. If we can be kind, I think we'll all be better off, and it'll be a more pleasant journey, and I think we'll have a better understanding of each other. So, kind of a universal comment, Vishal.
Wonderfully put again, Andrea. So, Kurt, your
I think one thing has become clear is that I think as we move forward, we should expect that there will be other and continuing new issues that we are all respectfully, myself included, ill-equipped to deal with because we've never dealt with them before. And it may be a DEI issue, it may be a public health crisis, it may be something else, but there will be, let's just assume that will continue. And so really, I would say doing 2 or 3 key things to prepare for that reality. One is this sort of cliche of always trying to think several steps ahead as opposed to just what's directly in front of you in that moment when that crisis hits. Two, I think, again, coming back to the importance and criticality of the role of frontline people managers, and leveraging that and investing in that now, assuming that you'll need that even more and they'll play an even more prominent role for all the reasons we've discussed. And then I think three, this whole point about change management and communications is key. And if that's not something where there's a lot of organizational capability, either within the HR function or outside of the HR function, build that now so that you have those mechanisms in place, you have that proficiency so that you have it when you will need it most here as we go forward.
Thank you so much, Kurt. So that brings to the end of the conversation, and I would like to thank Kurt, Andrea, and Kristine for joining with the conversation and helping us all understand what it takes to be a leader during the testing times and how to bring an organization back. And thank you for all that you are doing to spread love, kindness, and empathy. And I think one of the takeaway that I have it in my note is Jedi. I think that's, Kristine, you put it best. I think that's really, really amazing. And thank you everyone for that.
Yeah, it was a great session. I really learned a lot from both you, Kurt and Kristine. Thank you.
Likewise, I feel in excellent company and learned a lot as well, and appreciate, Vishal, the opportunity to be part of this discussion. Thank you.